Washington, Bruce Morton in Washington, Bill Plant in South Bend, Indiana, Bob Evans in Atlanta, Georgia, and Morton Dean in Miami.
Good evening. President-elect Richard Nixon spent a busy day in Washington today, where he briefed his cabinet and then met with President Johnson at the White House for the second time since the election. CBS News correspondent Dan Rather reports.
President-elect Nixon was 10 minutes late for his scheduled White House meeting with President Johnson. The first thing the President-elect said as he emerged from his limousine was, "I'm sorry we're late, Mr. President." With Mr. Nixon was his wife, Pat, and younger daughter, Tricia. With Mr. Johnson to greet the Nixons, Mrs. Johnson, and the Johnsons' younger daughter, Lucy. Mr. Nixon emerged from his limousine with his overcoat on. President Johnson, standing in the 30-degree temperature, did not have his overcoat on. Mr. Nixon, seeing this, took his off, handed it to a Secret Service agent. The Nixons and the Johnsons posed for photographers, standing beside the Andrew Jackson magnolia tree and beneath the Truman balcony at the White House South portico, held animated conversations for the benefit of photographers. Then the Johnsons and the Nixons disappeared into the White House, the ladies going upstairs to the mansion living quarters, the President and President-elect going over to the President's Oval Office in the West Wing. What they talked about, we do not yet know, but there's widespread speculation, and I should emphasize speculation only at this point, that one of the things they are discussing is whether President Johnson can and should hold another summit meeting with the Soviets before he leaves office. Dan Rather, CBS News at the White House. Now for details on Nixon's day with his cabinet, John Hart.
It could have been a movie premiere, the cast walking a welcome gauntlet of television lights and hotel employees who more often than not asked, "Who is that?" That is William Rogers, new Secretary of State, looking like a young Francis X. Bushman, finished now with minor supporting parts. There was the remembered matinee idol George Romney, content now with lesser roles than once he sought. The President-elect making his entrance properly tardy, but the next Secretary of Defense, Mel Laird, and the next Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, Robert Finch, felt secure enough to arrive after him. There was a full day of work, wives present with lectures from the President-elect's specialists on relations with Congress, with the press, and with history. Mr. Nixon told them to hire their own undersecretaries with his advice, and in doing so to seek a cross-section of ethnic and racial groups. Tomorrow, the next cabinet scatters looking for helpers and houses. John Hart, CBS News, Washington.
The Carnegie Commission on Higher Education proposed to President-elect Nixon and the incoming Congress today the passage of a civilian GI Bill that would allow an additional 1 million qualified but needy students to attend college. The Carnegie Commission recommendation would take the form of grants, work-study payments, fellowships, and a broad program of loans. It would cost an estimated $1.9 billion by 1970 and $3.5 billion by 1976.
If we had made the longer Benson and Hedges 100s a long time ago, we might never have known the British were coming. The discovery of electricity might have been 50 years later. For the love of 5 extra puffs, the Delaware might never have been crossed. Can you imagine what would have happened if Adam had smoked?
Clark's Tea-Berry Gum presents the Tea-Berry Shuffle. Have a little fun. Try Clark's Tea-Berry Gum.
Several Negro leaders have noted that the Nixon cabinet does not include representatives of minority groups. And one of the stronger reactions was expressed to CBS correspondent Bob Evans by Georgia State Legislator Julian Bond.
Any particular feelings about certain cabinet appointments?
Well, no, I just think it means Mr. Nixon thinks there are no black people, there are no Jews, there are no ethnic groups in the country, that his view of America is that it's largely elderly, it's white, it's Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and that all the other groups that make up the United States just don't exist, and that his administration and his cabinet's going to take care of the interest of WASP, and that the black, the poor, the Spanish-speaking Americans, the American Indians, that they're just out of things from now until 1972. first that I think the southern white community is going to take the Nixon candidacy as sort of a license to begin doing again the kinds of things they've largely stopped doing. That is night riding, terrorism, shooting into people's homes at nights. And I think it's very natural the black community is not going to sit by and take those things. It's going to respond in kind. We're going to defend ourselves and protect ourselves. But I think we're really just at a loss to really have a strategy over the next 4 years.
Mr. Bond, this may push it a bit far, but is that a prediction for open race war in the South?
Oh, no, I don't think that's going to happen, but I think it is a prediction that you're going to have a great many more sporadic outbreaks. I think they're going to be initiated by the white community, and I think the black community is going to respond in kind. And we're going to say that the day when we'd let people come into our community, the day when we'd let the white majority in the South tell us how we ought to behave and how we ought to act, that day is over, and we're just not going to take it anymore.
A spokesman for President-elect Nixon said today that William Scranton's statements on the Middle East tour represented strictly his own views and not those of the incoming administration. Scranton, while on that fact-finding mission for Nixon, said the new president would pursue a more even-handed policy in the Middle East. Some observers took this as a hint that Nixon might not give Israel the same degree of support that it received from the Johnson administration. While the cabinet officers and their wives were being briefed on the problems the men will face in their new jobs, their children were also busy. Bruce Morton reports.
The children of the victors came to call on the children of the vanquished today, and the loser was gracious. 22-year-old Tricia Nixon led 31 children of Nixon cabinet appointees on a tour of the city. First stop, the White House. Lucy Johnson Nugent welcomed them with smiles. Tricia said the house was more exquisite than I remembered it. Lucy said it can be the loneliest or the most rewarding place to live. The two compared clothes. Lucy favors minis, Tricia doesn't. 6-year-old Carl Hickel, the youngest tourist, stared about him and said, gee. Next stop, the Capitol, already shrouded in scaffolding for the inaugural, the stage from which these children's parents will move to power. House doorkeeper Fishbait Miller was there to welcome the group to the house, though he absent-mindedly told 10-year-old Jim Harden that his father had the Interior Department, not agriculture. The group dwindled a bit as the day wore on. The bus moved to the Smithsonian Institute. Tricia signed autographs for local kids. And 6-year-old Carl Hickel said firmly, we've made every trip. I want to go back to the hotel. The FBI revived him, though. What Republican wouldn't want to pose with J. Edgar Hoover? Tricia said she'd learned things about Washington she never knew before. Some of the younger ones looked as if they'd learned more than they wanted to know. The White House, Tricia said, was the favorite stop because Lucy gave us such a welcome. It's a beautiful city, she said. It will be nice to live here again. Bruce Morton, CBS News, Washington.
North Vietnam has, for the first time, agreed to let captured American pilots receive Christmas cards and packages. The State Department said today that Hanoi's representatives in Paris announced the authorization, saying it was given on humanitarian grounds. There are no precise figures on the number of airmen held in the North, but it is estimated there are more than 350 of them. In Paris today, U.S. and Saigon officials announced they have come up with a new seating arrangement proposal for the expanded peace talks. They said it may be presented to North Vietnam tomorrow, but they declined to go into detail. They indicated, however, that it does not depart from the basic Allied position that the talks must be two-sided rather than four-sided, as the communists are demanding. The latest weekly casualty toll in Vietnam lists 192 Americans dead, raising total U.S. combat fatalities in this country's longest war to 30,057. The U.S. command said that in that same period, going back to January 1961, more than 422,000 enemy troops have been killed. Communist losses last week were put at 1,715, while South Vietnam reported 150 battle deaths. In the latest reported fighting, U.S. Marines and North Vietnamese battled for 10 hours just below and inside the demilitarized zone. 12 Americans were killed and 30 wounded. 8 enemy bodies were found. The Pentagon today issued a February draft call for 33,700 men. And that's more than double the average monthly quota during the last 7 months of this year. The stepped-up inductions are the result of the planned early release of 37,000 National Guardsmen and reserves who were called to active duty earlier this year.
Behold the jogger. All over America, men and women are jogging in pursuit of physical fitness.
Often unmindful of the perils of the season, they jog on, just as though they'd never heard of colds or flu. That's why we've gone out of our way to bring them and you these valuable words of advice. When you catch a cold or flu, do what doctors say to do. Rest in bed, drink plenty of fluids, and take aspirin to relieve the pains and reduce the fever. Take Bayer aspirin, because Bayer is pure aspirin, not just part aspirin. And aspirin is what doctors recommend. Sure, you're tough, but be smart, too. As soon as you feel a cold catching up with you, do what doctors say to do. And for the pains and fever, remember, Bayer works wonders.
Secretary of the Interior Stuart Udall today called for tough new mine safety laws, which would include stiff penalties for mine operators and miners themselves if they violate the rules. Udall's proposals, made at a day-long Washington conference on mine safety, are designed to strengthen an administration mine safety bill which will go before the next Congress. Udall also said enforcement of existing mine safety laws will be stepped up. In the ferment of the Negro Civil Rights Drive, the conduct of the police has been both praised and blamed. Some critics charge that many policemen fail to understand the Negro and his problems. In South Bend, Indiana, officials are doing something to answer this criticism, and Bill Plant reports.
I realize I tend to be hitting hard at law enforcement officers all the way through this. But if there is any point, in other words, to what we're doing, you are attempting to understand a situation which exists in society today. I am trying to show you how that situation came about historically.
Dr. Rita Cassidy is a college professor. Her field is African and Afro-American history. But this is not her college classroom. It is a class of 26 rookie police trainees from South Bend and several other Indiana communities. This course in American Negro history is now a part of their police training, along with more standard items such as riot control, firearms, and laws of arrest. The object, to give these men an understanding of some of the reasons behind the generally negative attitude between police and the black community.
And perhaps you are bearing the brunt of ages past, that you have to change something for which you yourself are not responsible.
Dr. Cassidy's lectures and the one book which is required reading touch on African history, the slave trade and the institution of slavery in America, the trauma of Civil War and Reconstruction, and the writing of segregation into law in this century.
It is simply a question of understanding how the problems have arisen, understanding the fact that we, as part of the long heritage of white American society, must be ready and willing to work with the black community to become incorporated into the total pattern of American society. And I think perhaps even more importantly, and this perhaps is the hardest thing for us, to recognize our own prejudices.
A question being tested here is whether a knowledge of Negro history can really help a policeman in dealing with blacks who bear the scars of that history. On this, the rookies themselves are not in agreement. What was your reaction to the course in black history?
Well, I thought it was all one-sided myself as far as Dr. Cassidy's lecture was going. It brought out some interesting points that I didn't know, and I don't think it pertains to this day, this century, this year. The trouble we're having is based on the teenagers today. The older black people, we don't have very much trouble with them. The younger kids, they're starting to learn this. Our problems in a rookie class are going to be based on teenagers. They have their own set ways, and they're not going to... You get in a classroom, like I stated before, saying that violence was based on history. This is going to encourage, I think, in my opinion, to go out and raise a little Cain.
Can you see some practical applications in your police work now?
I think so. When you go, let's say, to a colored family, say they have a disorder of some kind, you're not going to go in there with the attitude that you're superior to them, you know. which is what Dr. Cassidy was telling us, that a lot of us have this feeling that we are superior to them because they are black and we are white, and consequently, you'll show this when you go to their home. And I think that she opened my mind to the fact that this is going on for years, and it's about time we shed this thing from our mind.
The attitudes and prejudices of this particular class of rookies, shaped as they are from most of us over a lifetime, may not change significantly after this 8-hour lecture course in Negro history. But this experiment, the department hopes, will help to broaden the understanding of the white policeman in the black community, whose job now calls for him to be sociologist, psychologist, and mediator, as well as lawman. Bill Plant, CBS News, South Bend, Indiana.
In Italy, Christian Democrat Mariano Rumor officially became premier tonight after he succeeded in forming a new center-left government. The coalition, which ended a month-long political crisis, will be considerably more leftist than the previous government, with the socialists gaining some significant cabinet posts. For instance, Pietro Nenni, the socialist leader, will be foreign minister. 2 United States destroyers returned to the Mediterranean today after a Black Sea cruise that was accompanied by angry Soviet protests and almost constant shadowing by Russian planes. And a Navy spokesman said U.S. warships will continue making periodic trips to the Black Sea. Meanwhile, it was disclosed that part of the 50-ship Soviet fleet in the Mediterranean has been withdrawn and returned to Russian waters. U.S. officials say that action could be seasonal, that the Russians have made a practice of bringing home some of their ships during the winter months. Britain's balance of trade improved last month as exports hit a record high and imports dropped slightly. Government officials in London say the figures give evidence that devaluation of the British pound 13 months ago is now having a favorable effect on the economy. Prices closed slightly lower on the New York Stock Exchange today. The volume was 18,160,000 shares, and the exchange index lost 2 cents.
The acid test. Watch us dramatize how Prestone gives your car extra protection against corrosion. Half of this metal gets coated with magnetic film in Prestone antifreeze, and half goes into antifreeze with ordinary corrosion inhibitors. Into hot acid, one is destroyed in seconds. Look at magnetic film's extra protection. Remember,
never pick up a stranger, pick up Prestone antifreeze.
We're sawing a battery in half. Sawing a battery in half, not recommended.
But we're going to prove that Eveready batteries have power to spare.
There's Eveready power, and that means power to spare. So when you need light most, get the most dependable flashlight batteries you can buy. Eveready batteries with power to spare. Products of Union Carbide.
U.S. health officials said today Hong Kong flu is now reported in at least 30 states, and the spokesman said the predicted national epidemic is just beginning. Deaths from pneumonia and flu are above normal, with the flu rate in some hospitals and colleges running at twice the national average. The peak still is expected late this month and into the new year. Pneumonia, complicated by emphysema, today caused the death of Tallulah Bankhead, the famous and flamboyant actress. Miss Bankhead died in a New York hospital at the age of 65. She starred in movies and plays for some 40 years, along with more than a few real-life dramas. At Cape Kennedy today, officials cleared up what they first thought was a leak in one of Apollo 8's first-stage engines and moved ahead with plans for next week's launch of 3 astronauts around the moon. Tests found the fuel leakage came not from an engine, but occurred while the booster's huge kerosene tank was being drained. They said such a thing would not happen during actual liftoff, and thus could not delay the scheduled launch. 30 passengers and 7 crew members were quickly returned to Miami last night, only hours after their Nashville to Miami jet was hijacked and forced to fly to Cuba. The 2 hijackers, a man and a woman, remained in Havana. Morton Dean reports.
It is now SOP, standard operating procedure. The crews fly their planes back to the States. Sometime later, the passengers follow in a chartered airliner sent to fetch them. And so it was last night. All related a rather familiar tale.
How did he approach you, Miss?
Yeah, would you could.
He very calmly walked up to me, pointing a gun at me, and coolly told me to take him to the cockpit. He said, take me to the captain. We are going to Havana.
Did you offer any resistance whatsoever?
I said, follow me.
Did he give you any reason why he wanted to go to Cuba?
No, he didn't.
Was there any other conversation with him when he was in the cockpit? Sorry, what you told him.
He did ask about fuel, didn't he?
Yeah, he asked about, 2 or 3 things pertaining to the flight. He inquired about fuel. We conversed with him before we made any transmissions on the radio to preclude the possibility of alarming him. That's about it. He confirmed our location once or twice, or tried to confirm it by looking out the window and making 1 or 2 inquiries.
Were the passengers
calm during most of this?
They were calm. Most of them were totally calm during most of this. One lady, it was her very first flight ever. She was a little bit frightened. She broke down for just a little while and later was fine again.
I just burst out crying because I was frightened anyway of the flight, and then when that was announced, I just went to pieces because I just figured, well, that was the end of me. I'd never get back to the United States again.
Captain, do you pilots have a procedure which you are to follow in the event of a hijacking? Is there some kind of a memo put out to
Yes,
pilots?
they do. They have information for us in case this happens.
Were you able to follow those procedures?
Yes, we were.
Could you tell us a little bit about what they are?
Yes, we have an approach plate for the Havana airport, so Jose Marti Airport, and it gives us the procedures for making an instrument approach should weather be there. It gives us radio frequencies and transponder codes, which are used in this case and for nothing else.
I asked this, Claude, as we were going from the Havana airport to the Veradero airport, I said, this is inconveniencing y'all, and what do the Cuban authorities think about this? Are you as unhappy about seeing it as those of us are here that's on the plane? And I didn't get a direct answer. All I got was, well, it's becoming so routine now. We have cut out all the red tape, and it's been arranged now where we can take care of this without any delays when it comes about.
Country and Western singer Tex Ritter saw the whole experience as not an ordeal, but something you could pass up.
Mr. Ritter, is this reminiscent of some of the exciting Westerns you've made?
Very similar, except there was no posse.
Morton Dean, CBS News, Miami.
In Havana, it's reported that as many as 5 armed guards are aboard domestic flights inside Cuba, apparently to keep Cuban planes from being hijacked and flown to the United States. Ethel Kennedy, the widow of the New York senator, gave birth today to the couple's 11th child, an 8-pound, 4-ounce girl. The spokesman at Washington's Georgetown Hospital said both mother and child are in excellent condition. Mrs. Kennedy has 3 other girls and 7 boys, ranging in age from 20 months to 17 years. A Texas legislator said today he will introduce the nation's first state law governing human organ transplants. The bill would let a physician determine when a patient is dead, but would prohibit the doctor who certifies the death from participating in the transplant operation. Texas leads the world in the number of heart transplants with some 28. Russia has decided to distribute intrauterine devices for family planning rather than birth control pills, which Soviet health officials said can have an undesirable side effect and sometimes serious complications. The decision became known in response to published complaints about the general unavailability of contraceptives in Russia.
I sincerely hope every mother has read this. It's vitally important. New Colgate with the advanced fluoride called MFP has been shown superior to the best-known stannous fluoride in reducing new cavities. Dental journals publish the reports of Colgate's superiority. Reports summarized in a book concerned parents can get. It was this Colgate book that told Mrs. Eve McDermott what MFP means to her family.
I read the summary, and it showed the results of tests made on children in Australia, Europe, and the United States. It's pretty clear to me that new Colgate with MFP was shown superior to the best-known stannous fluoride in reducing new cavities. I'm convinced it will really help. And the children all like its taste.
Write for your free copy of this summary to Research Center, Box 20, Mount Vernon, New York. Ask your dentist about new Colgate with MFP.
Now to Eric Severide in Washington for some thoughts on the makeup of President-elect Nixon's cabinet. Eric?
This is a government of laws, not men, but men make, interpret, and administer the laws. And conversational topic A in Washington now is the man Nixon and Nixon's men. Last night's little television drama was a play with one leading man and a supporting cast of character actors, whose characters, most of them, remain vaguely defined. The professional critics who rushed from their aisle seats last night to write their reviews are a bit baffled. The first impression of most of them seems to be that this is a gray flannel, buttoned-down, middle-aged, and middle-of-the-road administration, composed of competent, cautious products of the managerial revolution, men who will manage, guide, nurse government along, but who will probably not do much innovating, energizing, or dramatizing. This catches the Washington press corps with its adjectives down. Most of its members are dramatists at heart, and they are seized with the fear that they may be turning out noiseless copy from their noiseless typewriters for 4 long years, that the exclamation mark key will rust, the semicolon key wear out. If America is in a state of social revolution, this administration does not reflect it. It contains no identifiable zealots, nobody burning to roll up his sleeves and make America over, to use the famous Tugwell line. It looks like an antidote to social change, a cool compress for the fevered body. And it could be that this is what the majority of the people want. The body politic, too, can reach the point where it needs prolonged sedation. The question is whether events will allow it. Various forces like youth and the Negro movement were barely gathering under the quietude of the Eisenhower years, but are now in full explosion. Mr. Eisenhower's cabinet, however conservative its cast of mind, contains some hairy individuals like Dulles, Wilson, George Humphrey. Mr. Nixon's people seem far smoother. The pattern is so complete, it's clear that Nixon was determined to have no towering, prestigious individuals around him. 2 or 3 may yet develop from this group. The harsh, heavy wheels of government action often change the shape and size of men, not only presidents, but the men around him. Walter?
And that's the way it is. Thursday, December 12th, 1968. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
Direct from our newsroom in New York, in color. This has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.